the casual belief of a lot of Americans is actually pretty progressive. I mentioned earlier, and I've mentioned a couple times, but I want to take a look at this. Abortion ballot measures and minimum wage ballot measures and labor protective ballot measures won big. And that reminds me as well. You know, the liberal news media have been kind of in a frenzy to explain or justify like why the Democrats lost the election. A lot of people have been reaching for explanations, but I feel like the liberal news media is having an identity crisis. Many people have commented on it to that effect, where they're almost not sure if they should continue riding with the capital class, in which case they will go the way of CNN. Complete irrelevancy as the sort of boilerplate centrist media outlet that has to both sides everything and inevitably just cedes ground further and further right. Or to admit that Bernie Sanders was right the whole fucking time and to, like, finally embrace populism, right? In which case you actually do risk upsetting the capital class that drives the editorial decision-making at these news outlets. And I've seen some absolutely rancid takes from mainstream liberals over this election, you know, including such post-election takes as, oh, thank God, they nominated somebody reasonable for the Department of State. Marco Rubio. Like, fucking... The Democrats, it seems, at large, some of them are coming to, I think, correct realizations that, shit, Bernie Sanders was right, and we need to, like, we need to embrace populism, you know, left populism, socialism, right? But most of the like big heads at the Democratic Party are going the way of, like, we need to become even more the party of Liz Cheney. We need to become even more neoconservative, to such an extent that they are, like, doubling down on the civility angle and doubling down on saying that progressives were wrong and cost us the election, even though objectively the Dems being centrist cost them the election. You can look at down ballot measures for progressive policy prescriptions like minimum wage protections and abortion protections, and those policy packages, those ballot measures won big. They outperformed the Democratic Party in every state where they were on the ballot. The Democratic Party's politics of centrist liberalism, of civility politics, is toxic. The Democratic Party is toxic in politics. People love the left populism and a left-leaning platform, but they won't vote for it if it has a D next to its name. Bernie Sanders, while he works with the Democrats, is an independent. He has an I next to his name. And the abortion referendums, the minimum wage referendums, there's no D or R next to the names of either of those. So people feel less of the baggage. They can just consider them straight up. Meanwhile, the Democrats, rightly having cultivated a very toxic set of political baggage, are like loaded down with being so dishonest that any good sounding promise that they make is liable to be A, discarded entirely from the minds of the voters just straight up because they're not going to deliver it on it anyways, or B, lambasted by the right-wing, you know, media machine, a la consent manufacturing, right? And that's the direction that the Democratic Party's decided to stick with, the direction that has alienated everybody because they don't want to win and they don't care about winning. You know, if their objective was winning, they would be a socialist party. But their objective is not winning. Their objective is centrist liberalism. And so they will sacrifice a victory. They will sacrifice a political victory to maintain that. And they will even alter their political platform in ways that will sort of pacify people's demands. They'll try to, you know, they are truly like a snake in the grass. They will adopt any position that does not require them to challenge their ideological priors. You know, no matter how blatantly out of step with reality it is, you know, even if it alienates 10 million people in their voter base, right? The Republicans don't have this problem. The Republicans were all too willing to listen to their own base. Yeah, when you try to be a centrist, that doesn't mean that everybody likes you. It means nobody likes you because you come off as entirely dishonest. The political, like the Overton window shifts. Being a centrist, almost by definition, means that you do not have a consistent set of philosophical prescriptions. It means you don't actually believe in anything and you just want to appear like moderate and inoffensive. But by doing so, you actually appear as more offensive because you're like blatantly lying about what you believe because you don't believe anything. And we've and sorry to bring it all back, that's what we've seen in a lot of liberal news media outlets is that the Democratic Party, irrespective of what any given news media outlet or pundit decides to do, the Democrats are going to retreat even further into that mentality, and that is going to be the death of them. And at this point, I am beyond trying to reform the Democratic Party. I think it's best if they just disappear and let something better take their place. You know? It's not like they're going to be a meaningful opposition to the Republicans either way. Look at her. She wants to go outside. I'll be back in just a second. Alright, isn't that right? Okay. Alright. In fact, I want to highlight a way in which there's kind of a limit to how fascist America can get. There is, like... I don't want to mince words here. Things are going to get catastrophically bad. But there's a limit to how overtly Hitlerite the Republicans can actually be, because there's a very entrenched degree of social progressivism in America that it is very difficult for a top-down movement such as a fascist movement to uproot. You know? Fascism exists, like I said, as a top-down movement. They have no ground game, they have no long-standing cultural presence at the local level. It's all astroturfed by private capital. You know, it's all like federal politicians and business people and sometimes small business owners as well. But the average person, like, it's not the ideology of like mass casual belief. You know, the casual belief of a lot of Americans is actually pretty progressive. I mentioned earlier, and I've mentioned a couple times, but I want to take a look at this. Abortion ballot measures and minimum wage ballot measures and labor protective ballot measures won big. Here, hold on. Abortion ballot measures 2024. Let's take a look. Abortion, immigration, and what exactly? Yeah, let's look at this. Arizona, state that went red, enshrined the right to abortion in its state constitution. Constitutional protections for the right to abortion, passed by a 61 to 38% margin. Colorado, right to abortion and health insurance coverage, 62 to 38% margin, passed. Florida got voted down by 57 to 42% because country's dumb as fuck. But like, even in every state, even the ones that experience this massive red shift, rights to abortion and rights to certain healthcare, with the exception of South Dakota, I'm looking here. That's the one state. Passed these very progressive ballot measures because there wasn't a D next to them. Apparently, Idaho didn't have a citizenship requirement to vote, which is pretty funny, because they passed that as a referendum. Most states did not pass ranked choice voting. Let's see, Citizens Redistricting Commission. No, that didn't pass. What about, were there any wage-related ones? Minimum wage. Alaska, increased minimum wage and paid sick leave. Passed by 57 to 43. And of course, California voted down its minimum wage bill. But you see what I'm saying here, that at the sort of grassroots level, in the sort of casual lexicon of Americans, people are, relatively speaking, pretty progressive, at least relative to a lot of people in that, like, what you would believe if you you know, strictly listen to something like Fox News and watch the national election coverage for, like, federal elections, right? And yes, you know, a lot of this is because, you know, Americans broadly are not consistent ideologically. Most people aren't. But the point is that social progressivism exists. And for a fascist movement that has expressed over and over again that they want to get rid of that social progressivism, it's going to be very difficult. When ballot measures like protecting the right to abortion at a constitutional level, at the most basic ground level in the law, passes by a very wide margin, then, like, you can't really approach that as saying, like, we want to ban this. Like, people just won't go for it. And that is, I think, going to be the main obstacle to fascism in the United States. It's not going to be the Democrats. It's not going to be that kind of liberal, performative, take a knee sort of opposition that basically takes the wind out of the sails of real grassroots organizing. It is going to be the, you know, the small ballot measures that make it, like, excruciatingly difficult on the part of the fascists to make life worse, because the people have already resolved to make life better. And quite frankly, the United States will never be the kind of fascist where you can just throw out the kind, like, the election results that are so obviously valid. You know, if you look at a fascist state like Russia with Vladimir Putin, and they can just blatantly make up election numbers, you know, like the whole meme about, wow, 99% of the votes for Vladimir Putin. He's so popular. Wow. The fascists in America can't do that. They don't have the sauce. They can't get away with it. That is the one thing that might actually upset people. Those previous movements will help us more than we realize. Yes, every social and cultural victory that we have achieved at the ballot box has been in spite of the Democratic Party. It has been in spite of the top-down structures that claim to represent these values, and it is because of the grassroots movements that were organized around these principles. Because of NGOs that, you know, have various local chapters like Planned Parenthood, because of the local campaigns to say, hey, protect abortion rights. This is a like banal and normal health procedure that a woman should have the right to, like, basically to have her own sex life and you know, not be forced to carry every single zygote to term, you know? And people, you know, like I said, they go for that. They don't go for the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party does its best to make every position sound as unpalatable as possible. Because they fucking suck. Yeah, Alaska passed theirs. And Missouri passed a minimum wage and earned paid sick time ballot measure. You know? And because they were passed by direct ballot measure, that's going to be really, really hard for fascist operatives to overturn. Because, like I said, it is almost impossible for something that is entrenched at the grassroots level to be uprooted by a very top-down structure that has no existence at the grassroots. I voted for the minimum wage increase? Nice. You'll love to see it. Now, there were a number of states where the minimum wage referendums didn't pass, and I think that's because the minimum wage is one of those things that there's a much more active media campaign against on the part of the Republicans, which is a way in which they can attempt to influence the grassroots level. But with abortion, it's one of those things that even the Republican Party can't touch anymore because they're the dog that caught the car, you know? Yeah, another contradiction. We want more money, but we don't want more minimum wage. Yeah. You know, it would be really something. I'd be willing to bet if there was if there was a ballot referendum in a number of very deep red states that, you know, people organize at the local level to say, hey, protect union rights, protect the right to organize in your workplace, you know, with your colleagues to demand better pay and conditions. I bet that would pass with flying colors to such an extent, and like you would be able to see that coming to such an extent that a lot of the media cycle leading up to it would be Republicans trying to figure out a way to sabotage the referendum, to introduce really confusing language, to introduce something that makes it not legally binding or something like that. Because we saw actually the same thing with issues as ubiquitous as something like abortion in a number of states in years past where these referendums were being considered. The Republican Party would actually try to subvert the ballot process by doing those exact things that I mentioned, by introducing really confusing verbiage, language, and naming conventions, by like trying to introduce provisions that would make a 50% plus one vote total insufficient for a measure to pass, to try to make these things like not legally binding so that even if they pass, they wouldn't mean anything. They really, really don't want these to pass, but they know that there's not that much that they can do. Like 50% of votes is 50% of votes. And you know, so they have to try to find a different way to deal with it. That's where our victories are going to be, I think. Our strategy should be no party. Yes, in the interim, it should be. Now, obviously, you know, when it comes time to vote, and there are officials, there are candidates from either party, you should still vote for whichever party is the lesser evil and is the most likely to win, because all likelihood we're dealing with a first past the post voting system still. But myself and every other leftist online will tell you that is not where the bulk of political organization lies. That's not where the bulk of the political work is to be done. Cultivating social connections is probably like, it is the most difficult and yet at the same time the most important part of political organizing. You know? I hate whoever got the idea that voting is everything. It is a very liberal idea because liberals are content and wish to market the idea that democracy only exists at the ballot box, that every aspect of democracy is that which can be condensed to the ballot box. It is not. And that is the same idea that has ultimately condemned democracy to its fate, because in saying that voting is the most important, it is everything, it is like the end-all be-all of political engagement and, you know, the object around which all political organizing takes place, they have effectively put a blinder on everybody's eyes, the liberals have, for the rest of political life, over all of the other aspects of political engagement in your community that do not occur strictly at the ballot box, you know? And that is part of how things got as bad as they are, is because liberals turned everybody's attention away from everything else and strictly towards the ballot box. Things got worse and worse and worse before we even got to see those results reflected at the ballot box. You know? I have a preferred term. I think he's going to die before that happens. It is possible that Trump dies while he's in office, in which case J.D. Vance takes over, the absolute fucking fascist technocrat ghoul that he is. You know, in which case, God help us all, but maybe he's enough of a charisma vacuum that fucking, you know, maybe. I don't know. Look, again, this is kind of like for the future stuff, and I'm not You guys know from my track record, and in some ways I'm not great at predicting the future, so I don't want to hinge too much on that. But I can like analyze the past, and I can talk about what I think matters right now. And what I think matters is those like local level and regional direct ballot referendums by which the popular vote one-to-one influences policy. Yeah, if you want to look at the strategies that fail, take your lessons from liberals. Thanks for watching, and support the channel if you would be so kind.